Advanced Splat Config Part 1. Alright everyone, in this nugget we're going to review the framework that makes up the Secure Platform Operating System. And although Checkpoint is known for some of their more powerful GUI clients such as Smart Dashboard, Smart View Tracker, and Smart View Monitor, we're going to review Secure Platform extensively in these next two nuggets to get you up to speed and to get you completely comfortable with administering, verifying, and configuring your Splat install via the command line. In this nugget we will cover Splat operating system shells, and then we will cover Splat operating system commands. So sit back, take some notes, and let's get started. Okay, so let's go over the two shells that you need to be familiar with for your Secure Platform Operating System. Now, the two shells that we have is a standard mode shell and an expert mode shell. A standard mode shell is going to give you the ability to do some limited commands, and the expert mode shell is going to essentially allow you to be root on the system. So as we authenticate to our Nugget firewall here, let's log in. We are in our standard mode shell. And the way you know this is you're going to see the host name followed by the pound symbol. And it's going to tell you to see the commands that are available from this particular shell to simply issue a question mark key. But before we do that, let's see how you get into the advanced mode shell. And that is simply done by issuing the expert command. So whenever you type in expert, it's going to ask you to enter your password. And the first time you authenticate to your system, it's going to make you set your expert mode password whenever you type in expert. So now that we're in expert, it's going to tell us you're in expert mode now, and it's going to say expert at the host name followed by the pound symbol. And that's essentially how we know we're in expert mode. So let's go ahead and type in exit here, and that'll get us out and back to our standard mode shell. And let's go ahead and issue a question mark key, and we're going to see these are the commands that we can do from our standard mode shell. And now we're not going to cover every one of these commands, but because most of them are going to apply to our Secure Platform Operating System, and although all of them may not apply to your CCSA objectives, I'm going to get you up to speed on definitely what you need to know to cover those objectives, but to also get you completely comfortable with administering your Secure Platform Operating System. So the first command that I want you to see is how do you change your password? And that command is simply the passwd command. So we type in passwd, and it's going to ask you what is your current password. So let's go ahead and put that in, and now it asks us what is our new password. Okay, one more time. Alright, so passwords didn't match, so let me go ahead and try that again. Alright, good. So it took our password. So our password is changed at that point. Now the next command that I want you to understand from the Secure Platform is the time zone command. So let's go ahead and type in time zone. Now during the install of Splat, you're going to see that you're going to need to set the time zone, but if you have a Secure Platform Operating System already up and running and you need to change your time zone, let's say maybe you moved a firewall or a management server from the East Coast to the Central Time Zone, and you need to be able to change this, or you want to walk someone through doing this just in case something isn't configured correctly, you can do it via the command line just by typing in time zone. So let's go ahead and do that. And we're going to do 2 for Americas, 45 for the United States, 9 for Central Time where I'm at, and I'm going to do 1 for the Chicago to approve it, and hit enter, and it's going to update my time zone, and we're good to go. So that's how we update our time zone without having to directly jump into sysconfig, which we'll see as part of our checkpoint commands. And the next command that I want you to look at is the time command. Simply, time is going to give us our time, and then if we issue a date, we're going to see our date command. And now that we have time zone, date, and time all covered, let's look at one of the more important commands and for Secure Platform, and that's simply the ver command. Now if you issue a ver command, it's going to tell you this is your Checkpoint Secure Platform NGX R65 and your current build number. So if you ever need to call into Checkpoint TAC for support, that's one of the things they're going to ask you is, what version of software you're running, and you can simply get that with the ver command. Alright, so let's move into some other commands that are very important for your Splat operating system and for your standard mode shell. And that first command is going to be or the next command is going to be, let's look at NTP. Let's see why the network time protocol is so critical and so important, and how do we configure and modify this protocol via the command line. So if we type in NTP and we hit enter, we're going to see that there's a couple options here. We can see that we have an NTP usage where we see NTP, and then it asks us for an MD5 secret, followed by the interval, and then the server that we want to update from. And then we have an NTP-N, where we're going to issue our interval, followed by the server. This first one is a more secure NTP update. Let's say if you have an NTP server in your organization, you can actually set an MD5 secret between that server and your secure platform operating system to have a secure NTP update for the network time protocol. Now we're actually going to do an NTP-N, and we're going to do one in the clear over to one of the government NIST servers for the United States government. So let's take a look at that and see what that would look like to set up your NTP via the command line. So let's go ahead and issue that command to get our NTP set up. So we're going to do an NTP-N, and then once we do our NTP-N, we need to specify our update interval. So let's go for every 300 seconds or minutes, and then we're going to issue the actual box that we're going to update our NTP from, so the server IP address. And we're going to use one that's actually in Alexandria, Virginia, and it's going to be 206.246.118.250. And we hit enter, and it'll just take a second for it to take that for us. So now that we've put that command in, how do we know it's running? And there's simply a cool command we can do here to do an NTP stat, and it tells us NTP is running. Now if we find ourselves where we want to stop our NTP, we can simply hit the up arrow and do an NTP stop. And if we need to restart it, up arrow again and make it a NTP start. But that does bring up a good point that you need to be familiar with, and that you need to be comfortable with, is using your up and down arrows to be able to scroll through your previous commands. It'll definitely save you some keystrokes and some time. Alright, so that's a good idea to understanding exactly how to get NTP set up and how to verify it and to stop and start the process. Now you need to be comfortable with NTP, because it becomes very, very important when you start talking about certificate-based authentication, as well as working with VPNs inside the Checkpoint security products. So NTP is definitely a best practice for having secure platform firewalls and management servers. So if you have the ability to run a network time protocol either in your company or out on the internet, I do recommend you doing that. Now the next commands that we want to look at are pretty self-explanatory, and those commands simply are exit, and then we can do a shutdown and a reboot. So all those commands are going to do essentially what they sound like they're going to do. So let's do an exit, and that'll get us completely back to the start of our shell. So anytime you get through configuring something, you're going to want to issue the exit command and get you directly back to the shell. Now there is a default timeout variable that's set up inside a secure platform that's going to time out your system after about a period of about 15 to 20 minutes of idle time. And once you have that in place, it's a good idea to just go ahead and leave that default value in place and allow it to do that, just in case you have an administrator forget to log out. So let's go ahead and authenticate one more time, and let's look at some other commands for our standard mode shell. So let's do a VPN12 and let's see if we can get in here. Oh, we changed our password, didn't we? As part of our passwd command. So let's go ahead and put this in again. And alright, so we're in here now. So let's go ahead and issue an expert mode shell, and that's going to jump us over to our expert mode shell. And what we're going to see when we type that in is it's going to tell us that we essentially have two different passwords at this point, because when we issued the passwd inside the standard mode shell, we only changed the password for that shell. Now to change the expert mode password, we would have to issue it in this particular shell as well. So if we do a passwd, it's going to ask us for our new expert mode password. Alright, So let's go ahead and issue a clear to get us a clean slate to work with, and we'll do an exit to jump back to our standard mode shell. Alright, so let's go over a very important command now that you're going to want to be comfortable with for the secure platform operating system. Now this command can definitely save you, and let's say for example you have a junior administrator who comes running up to your desk and then they're saying, you know, I made some commands on the firewall or the management server, and I'm not sure exactly what happened, and I can't recall exactly what I typed in, and maybe they're not familiar with scrolling through the up and down arrows. There is another command that you can use to help you, and that command is the audit command. So let's do an audit, and it's going to tell us we have the option to set the audit lines for the number of lines we want to see. We can do an audit show for the number of lines, or we can do an audit clear to clear the buffer. So let's do audit, and we're going to actually do a show for the last 10 lines. And there we go. So audit command, very important, very powerful, and something you should know. So let's go ahead and get out of here. And now we're going to go ahead and just issue an exit command to take us back to our shell. We're going to authenticate one more time. And then we're going to go ahead and put our password in. And once we get in, let's look at some other commands that are familiar to us and some things that we need to understand for our standard mode shell. And the next command I want you to look at for troubleshooting is the good old ping command. Now the ping command is going to allow you to check connectivity on your network. So as you can see, we're issuing our ping out to our internet connection now, and we can see that we're getting a reply back, so that indicates that we have a good connectivity. So you're going to use your ping command to check your connectivity between the boxes on your network. So if we wanted to see if our Nugget firewall was up, we would do, or our Nugget management server, we could try to ping over to it. So let's see what we get if we check that out. And that's under 10.20.20.20. And if we ping that, looks good. Alright, so let's get out of there for now. And now the next thing I want to show you here for your secure platform operating system is let's take a look at the traceroute command. Now the traceroute command is going to give you the ability to trace a path through your network and out through the internet to see every hop that it hits on its way to its destination. So let's do a traceroute to 4.2.2, and as we can see, we're going to jump through a few hops here. So let's stop that, and let's take a look at what we have. Our first hop here was our actual ISP router that we're using on the external side of our firewall, which is the 172.20.20.1, and then we see our ISP router, and then the uplink ISP router, which is Quest Communications for our network. So that's essentially what you need to know about the traceroute command, and you need to be able to trace route from your network to go outbound. You'll use it in this manner. Alright, so that looks good. And the next command that we want to look at is our netstat command. The netstat command is going to give us the ability to look at some network statistics. So if we issue that in its basic command, it's going to show us some actual established connections on our Nugget firewall. Now there is one here that's pretty important that we can see, and that is this. The standard FW1 logging port is TCP port 257. So what we see is we have our Nugget firewall, which is 10.20.20.1 on dynamic port 32,785, is connected to our Nugget management server over port 257, and it says the connection is established. So very important to understand. You can use netstat to see that kind of data, but we can also get more granular with netstat, and let's do that now. So let's do a netstat space -rn, and what that's going to give us is our routing table. So there's going to be from time to time that you need to see what your default gateway is or what your routing table looks like on your Splat config, and you can get that via the netstat command. And once you look at this, you can see that your default route is going to be to go out the .1 for your ISP router that we're using in our examples. Now the next command that I want you to see is kind of how to get the same information, and you can do that via the route command, and that'll give you the routing table as well. Now, like I said, netstat is very powerful, and you can do quite quite a bit of things with it, and you can actually get more granular with your netstat command. And let's take a look at that as well. For this, we're going to have to jump into our expert mode shell. So let's go ahead and type our password in there, issue our clear command to get us a clean slate to work with, and we're going to do a netstat dash an space pipe space grep, because we're going to sort and we're going to search for a certain thing, and we're going to look for 257. And what do we see? This is for the firewall 1 logging information we were talking about earlier. We can see that by using this to search for a certain port number, you can kind of shrink down your results as opposed to issuing a regular netstat command. We can see that the connection we're looking for is this particular Nugget firewall, which is going over to our Nugget management server for our logging of our data that's going through our firewall back to our checkpoint management server. So very powerful commands and very useful. So let's go ahead and issue a clear here, and we'll stay in the expert mode for a few seconds here and look at a few other commands that are going to be beneficial. Now from this particular shell, let's actually go ahead and just issue some more commands that you need to be familiar with. And the next command that we want to look at is our host command. Now our host command is going to be controlled by what's inside of our etc/host file. So it's very important that you do not modify these particular entries that are in here already, because you could potentially cause yourself a problem. So if you need to add some things to the etc host file, you can do this. If we did a cd to /etc/ let's get to etc first, and then we're going to do more on host, and we can see that it's going to tell us do not remove the following line, or various programs may not work, is essentially what it's saying. And the main one that's important is this one right here for your 127.0.0.1 for your local host, local domain, local host. And that essentially is the command or the entry inside your host file that must be in place. But the point I wanted to make is that the host command is going to give you what's contained inside of this etc host file. Alright, so it looks good. So let's go ahead and use our up arrow commands to clear our screen, and let's look at a few other commands that are going to be beneficial for you. Now the next command I want you to see is your ifconfig command. Now, to some of you who are maybe have a background in Unix or Linux, a lot of these commands are going to be pretty simple for you, and you're probably used to using them, but I want to make sure I cover the basis for everyone who may be enjoying this CCSA series. So let's do shift, and we're going to do a page up. So from the command line, another thing that you can do is actually hit the shift on your keyboard and the page up on your keyboard to be able to scroll up and down in your secure platform shell. So that's pretty useful for sure. So if you do a clear and we issue that ifconfig command one more time, we're going to see that we can't see everything. But if we do that shift and that page up, we can see that it's actually going to move us around where we can see everything. But that's a pretty cool command for sure. But the point I wanted to see about the ifconfig command, it's going to give you your interface configuration on your secure platform operating system. And this is where we can see each one of our interfaces, ETH0, ETH1, and ETH2, how they're configured, their IP addresses, their subnet mask, and all that information. And one more important one for this type of information is the IP space ADDR command. Now this command is pretty simple because it gives you the same information that you saw in the ifconfig, but in a much compressed format. So use either one of them, just whatever you're comfortable with, you're going to get what you need to know. The ifconfig is going to give you a little bit more data that you need to see, but this can give you a quick format where you can compress exactly looking at which interface has which IP on it. Alright, so let's look at a few other commands here, and we're going to go through to check out some advanced commands that you're going to really want to know. Now, I want to show you a command here that's really cool, and is going to be your best friend in troubleshooting your checkpoint operating systems, and that command is your TCP dump command. You need to be familiar with this command, because there's going to be times where people are going to ask you, is the connection getting to the firewall? Now you can verify this type of stuff via the SmartView Tracker application, but you can also verify it via the packet level. And we can do this by issuing a TCP dump command. So let's see what that would look like and how would we format that type of command. So let's take a look at, we'll issue a TCP dump because we want to dump exactly what's going on the interface. We do a -I to specify the interface. And let's give it our actual interface, which is going to be an ETH0 for example. So now that we're dumping on that command, what we're going to do, let's go ahead and issue some ping commands toward our Nugget firewall and see what we get. So let's go ahead and go a start run, jump into our command line here, and let's do a ping to 172.20.20.2, and let's make it continuous. Alright. So let's go ahead and make this full screen again where we can see everything. But what do we have? We have the actual packet level ICMP echo request and the echo reply that's going on from our Nugget firewall. So that's some pretty cool information. So from the packet level, we can see that when we issue the TCP dump command, we can look exactly on our external interface, and as people are trying to talk to us, we can see exactly as the traffic comes inbound and goes out that interface. So very valuable, very important command that you really want to know. Alright, so let's go ahead and clear our screen here. We're going to look at some more important commands. Alright, looks good. And the next command that we want to look at is our DNS command. So you may have a question posed to you, what is your current DNS server that you're running from your Nugget firewall or your management server? And you can get this information simply by entering the DNS command. And it's going to tell you what your current DNS servers are. So pretty important, and it's a quick way to identify that information for sure. Now the next thing I wanted to take a look at is the web UI command. Now the web UI command is pretty important for setting the web user interface of your secure platform operating system. Now we talked about this quite a bit during our installation of our secure platform OS, but let's see how we change that on the fly. And we can do this by issuing the web UI space, and let's just do that and hit enter. So we can see the usage. It says you can use a web UI space enable and then issue the port, or you can disable it. So let's go ahead and make sure that we have it set up for web UI space enable. Alright, and let's make sure our 1980 port is there. And as we can see, it's going to shut down the HTTP process, and it's going to restart it to give us the ability to log into the web UI that we'll see when we exit out totally out of our Nugget firewall. When it goes back to log in, it's going to tell us right here that we can connect to this box on the external interface via that dynamic port of 1980. Alright, so the next command we want to look at is, let's say you have some users and you need to administer those users. So let's dive in and we're going to take a look at how we can do all that via the Splat command line. Alright, looks good. So let's clear that, and let's go ahead and go back into expert mode one more time here, because that's going to give us the ability to kind of do everything. Because as we notice, the clear command doesn't work from our standard mode shell, but we can do it from our expert mode shell because we are root. Alright, so let's look at how we want to add a user. So let's do add user. And it's going to ask us that our usage is, we can do add user, and then we can give it a username. So let's do add user, and we're going to say Bob. And it's going to ask us, what's Bob's password? Alright. Alright. User Bob was added successfully. So let's say Bob was a bad employee and you need to get rid of Bob. How do you take out his account? It's simply del user, and then his username. Are you sure you want to remove the user Bob? We are sure. Alright, so it tells us Bob was removed successfully. And now we can actually issue a show users, and that needs to be one word, to see the users that you have available in your secure platform operating system. And now that we have that in place, let's look at how we administer our secure platform administrator lockout variables for people who are authorized to log into Splat. So we're going to issue a lockout, and we can see our various options here where we can do a lockout space enable, the number of attempts, and the lockout period in minutes. So let's try to issue that. So let's do a lockout space enable and a number of attempts. Let's say if you try to log in and you goof up your password 6 times, let's lock you out for a period of 1 hour. Alright, so we issue that command. How do we know that it's working? We can do it this way by using a lockout, and we would do a lockout show to see exactly if that's working. So if we do a lockout show, and it tells us users will be locked out after 6 unsuccessful attempts for 60 minutes. So it's a good practice to do that if you're going to have a number of people or security staff that are going to be responsible for administering your secure platform infrastructure. I do recommend that you set this up, and you will have the ability to unlock them as well. So let's look at that. So let's do unlock user, and it's going to ask us what's the syntax. You can do unlock user and you specify the username. And now how do you check if someone is actually locked out? You're going to do a check user lock. So let's do a check user lock, and it's going to ask us to specify the username. So you have good control there of how you can enable security for your administrators, and how you can unlock your administrators, and how you can check if they are actually locked out in the first place. So definitely some good commands to keep in your toolbox there for secure platform. Okay, and the next command I want to show you is the ARP command. Now the ARP command is going to give us the ability to look at the address resolution protocol, where we can see our actual IP address to hardware address mapping, or our layer 2 to layer 3 mapping. And as we can see that the interfaces that we have for ETH0, ETH1, ETH2, we can see this mapping here. So that's a good idea to understand exactly how the ARP packets are looking on our network. So that's definitely useful as well. Now the next thing that I want to show you, which is very, very useful, and that is the SSH protocol. So what we're going to do is go ahead and exit out of here. Now, more than likely, in most cases, you're not going to have direct console access to your secure platform firewall or your secure platform operating system on a daily basis, because most of the time this is going to be kept in your data center or in your wiring closet, and it definitely should always be kept behind lock and key in a closet or something where someone can't just walk up to it and try to exploit it via its console. So there's a very important shell option, and that is SSH. And we're going to use that SSH protocol via the PuTTY application. So I want to show you that. So let's take a look at using PuTTY at this point. So let's go ahead and click on this, and I have the PuTTY application here. And let's go ahead and open up the PuTTY application, and we're going to try to actually issue a command over to our Nugget management server that's going to give us the ability to PuTTY into it. But before we do that, we're going to need to issue a actual NAT on our Nugget management server to get it natted out to our public side that we're coming to from the 172 network. So let's have a look at that, and then we'll get everything configured and to run properly for us. Alright, so now that we're logged into our Nugget management server's dashboard via our Nugget server here, let's take a look at how we would issue a static NAT out to our Nugget management server to get it accessible, just in case we needed to log in maybe from the internet to actually see everything. So let's go ahead and cancel off of this for now, because we don't really want to know about the automatic updates from the system. But what we want to see at this point is we want to see exactly how this NAT is going to work for us. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up this Nugget management server, and then we're going to click on NAT, and we're going to tell it to add a static NAT out to the internet that's going to give us the ability to log into it. Let's say, and this is going to be useful if you need to actually log in like across an internet connection and your management server is in another location that you're not physically connected to in the same internet network, for example. So we're going to do 172.20.20.50, and we're going to issue that out to our Nugget firewall, so it looks good. And we're going to hit OK, and we're going to go through a whole lot more NAT information in our network address translation nugget, but I just wanted to show you that for now. Let's do a policy install, and we're going to issue that policy out to our Nugget firewall, and then we should be able to SSH from our desktop to our Nugget management server using this 172 IP address. So this should just take a second here, and then we'll test that information out once the policy gets installed. And we're just about installed, and as you can see, it's installing our policy. And usually this will take just a couple seconds depending on the speed of your Smart Center server and how much memory you have available. So it says installation completed successfully, so we're in good shape. Let's close off of this, and now let's go ahead and take a look at what that SSH would look like. And one more point that we're going to need to do before we can actually putty into our Nugget management server on its newly natted public IP is we're going to need to make sure our network security policy through our Nugget firewall is going to allow that traffic to pass. So let's try to connect. And as we can see, this probably isn't going to connect for us, and it should give us an error here in a moment stating that it's having a connection problem. And let's see what we have here. So let's look, and it has a default timeout of about 60 seconds or so where it's going to actually issue a network error connection timed out. So let's go ahead and close off of this and bring up our Nugget server, and let's look at that actual packet information. And we can see that the SSH packet was actually dropped. So from our trainer machine toward that IP was dropped. So we need to modify our security policy. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to do a file. Let's get out of tracker for now. And let's come back on our firewall management rule. And let's say we'll drag our actual Nugget management to our destination. And we can just do that because we know we have our NAT on this object. We'll just drop it right here via these protocols. We're good to go. Policy install that, and this will allow us to connect to our Nugget management server over that IP address. We will want to verify your IP address that you're coming from, because I actually issued a object for our 172.20.20.203 for the IP address of our management server, which is right here for our trainer machine. Alright, so let's take a look at that and see if we can actually SSH over to it now. So let's do a IP config and see where we're coming from. If we scroll up, we see we're coming from 172.20.20.203, so it looks good. So let's try our putty one more time. Over to 172.20.20.50. Open. Alright, what do we got? It says your server's host key is not cached in the registry. You have no guarantee that the server is the computer that you think it is. It gives us our server's RSA key fingerprint, and it allows us to approve the actual server in an RSA key hash on our system. So we want to approve that, and that's going to give us the ability to log into our Nugget management server. But the point I wanted to make there is that you need to use PuTTY or an SSH client in your environment, because that's going to encrypt the data that goes between your desktop and your Nugget management server or Nugget firewall, because that information is going to be encrypted across an SSL tunnel using triple DES encryption as part of the SSH protocol. So very important information, and you need to use SSH in your environment. So let's go ahead and authenticate, and we'll get into our Nugget management server. And alright, we're in there. So we get our point that I wanted you to see, that we can exactly jump into our machines using the SSH protocol, because we're not going to be able to administer them on a daily basis by walking up to them, and it's nice to be able to access them remotely from your desk. In this nugget, we covered our Splat operating system shells, where we saw our standard mode shell and our expert mode shell, and then we looked at our Splat operating system commands that we want to be familiar with, and we looked at a lot of the administrative type commands and different things, like I said, that might be common knowledge to some Linux and Unix users, but I want to make sure everyone's comfortable with our Splat operating system. And I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.